The fish. I was messing around with the camera. Fish came in and grabbed it. Let's see if we can get him back. There he is, got him. Nice. A little rainbow. Alright, so today I'm going to do a little video about, oop, he's off. So I can keep my gloves away from him. Here you go, pretty little rainbow. Today I'm going to do a little video about ways to reduce ice buildup on your guides while you're ice fishing. So I was actually just taking photos of the ice on my guide there since it's in the low teens this morning, and the trout came along and smashed my gear. But there are 4 things that you can do to reduce ice buildup on your guides, and I'm going to go over those with you today. Now, probably one of the most common things you're going to hear is applying some kind of hydrocarbon or silicone-based lubricant to your guides. So a lot of folks, oops, there's fish up high here. I can't get his attention. Looking at, oh, there you go, got him. Now that includes things like waxes, Vaseline, even like cooking oils like Pam. Your canola oils can be applied, and also silicone-based sprays. There you go, nice little rainbow, pretty fish. And there he goes back down, cool. And those will work great in the short term to reduce your buildup on there. And what happens is those hydrocarbons, basically, when they coat your guides, is as ice forms on there and you bring your line up or down, then the ice doesn't get a good bond to the guides and it just comes off, and with your line and the friction from your line. And that works good, like I said, in the short term, but eventually, there's another fish right here. Eventually it will wear off and you have to constantly renew it. And that's why actually it's something that I don't tend to favor as much. It's definitely a short-term fix, like I said. And you know, if you just got like a cold morning that you're trying to get through and the sun's supposed to come out, it's supposed to warm up, then that might be a good solution. But there are 3 other things I think you can do that will actually dramatically reduce the amount of ice buildup you get on your guides. Come on. Come on. There he goes, got him. So the first thing I think that's most important, and the thing that's often overlooked, another little rainbow, it's kind of a skinny guy, is you should look at the guides themselves, the guide design. Now, if you have a good ice fishing rod, get that guy back in the water. If you have a good ice fishing rod, you want to look for guides that are thin wire guides. So one of the things I've noticed is, you know, like with dedicated ice fishing rods, you can get these really nice thin wire guides that don't accrue ice as quickly because they have less surface area. So surface area is going to be a common theme I'm talking about today. And these are titanium guides that I'm using here. So the nice thing about titanium is that it's very tensile. That is, it wants to spring back to its original shape as long as it's above -10 degrees. Better than, say, steel or aluminum. And so you can just literally flick these things with my finger like I'm flicking a guitar string or something, and it just kicks all the ice right off because they're very thin. They spring right back to their original shape, and I don't have to worry about that. If I'm using cheaper thin wire guides, like, say, that are steel or aluminum, you can actually bend them and they won't bend back into their original shape, whereas titanium, that's great. So for example, on this little noodle rod I have here, it's like $10. It has thin wire guides, but they're steel, so they don't flex as easy, and so it's a little bit more work to get the ice off, but I can still chip that ice away pretty easy. So you can see I got a fair amount of ice buildup on this rod tip here. So all I have to do is, just because it's titanium, just flick it and it'll come right off. It doesn't really bond to it. Whereas with a lot of the sort of cheap ice fishing rods I've seen, a lot of them coming out of China on Amazon, you know, the blanks on these aren't bad, but they're using traditional open water guides. That is, guides with ceramic inserts. So you have these really narrow guides with big surface area. They have that big flat ceramic or steel surface, and the ice just binds up in those really, really quickly, and it's hard to chip out of there because it's very small and narrow. They are stiff, and it makes it really difficult to clean out the ice, and they just ice up so much faster. So definitely look for wire guides when you're looking for an ice fishing rod, and that will reduce your ice buildup and your ability to more quickly clear ice off of your guides. If the ice binds up your line while you're fighting a fish, you can snap that fish off because you're basically disabling the drag system of the reel, right? Because now you're just fighting the fish on the rod and the line. Now, a third consideration to make, especially, you know, as I'm going up and down through the water column here and reeling up line and chasing marks on my fish finder, is that, you know, the main thing that's transporting water up onto your guides is line, right? And so now that the line that you choose is actually just as important as your guides, I think. And you know, there's three main lines that you can use when you're ice fishing, and that is monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braided fishing lines. And each of those is going to transport water up onto your guides differently. So two of your most common fishing lines that are clear, that are hard for fish to detect, are monofilament and fluorocarbon, and they're both relatively smooth on the outside, so they disperse water off their surface pretty readily, and they're a really good choice if you're having problems with your guides icing up, because especially monofilament, it's very hydrophobic. It floats on water. If you put a little piece of monofilament on the water, it'll float, and that will reduce the amount of water that's ending up on your guides. The same goes with fluorocarbon. It's a little bit higher density, a little bit less hydrophobic, but still going to give you a really good dispersal of water off of the line, so you're not going to get as much water transported up onto your guides. At the same time, diameter is a really important factor there too, because the more surface area you have on your line, the more water is going to get transported up. So it's a trade-off. You want to run as small a line as you possibly can so that you don't get as much ice buildup, but you don't want to go so small that you're breaking off fish, that you have some abrasion resistance because you have fish rubbing the line on the ice. So you really want to balance those two things out. So a thinner line is going to give you an advantage in terms of water transport up onto your guides, but you might snap off more fish too. So I generally run right around 4 pounds. I think that's like ideal for me, especially with the smaller fish that I'm catching. You know, even if I hook into a big 3 or 4 pound rainbow or heavier, you know, if I play it right and have my drag system set correctly, I can still bring that fish up through the hole. Now, I actually use braid for my main lines. And, oh, there's a bite and I missed it. Dang it. And there are two distinct types of braids on the market. There are your woven braids. So I'm talking about like your 6 and 8 strand braids from like Power Pro or Tough Line, where they're woven together. And then there are your braided lines like Fireline, which is actually a thermally fused braid. And that's what I prefer. That fused braid actually creates a little bit more of a hydrophobic surface. It doesn't soak up the water like Power Pro or Tough Line do. And I just absolutely have had nightmares with trying to use Power Pro and Tough Line, because it'll soak up the water, it comes up and it just squeegees out all that water onto your guides, and you get a lot of ice buildup. And inevitably, because I'm also using light, you know, 2 to 4 pound leaders, I'll get enough ice bound up in there that braid will freeze up in the guides, and the fish will go to make a run and it'll snap it off. So I really prefer the fused fire lines from Berkley. Now, one of the major issues with them is as you use them, they will start to fray and they'll start to gather more ice, and that can cause problems. So you need to periodically change out your top 4 or 5 foot. Oh, there's a fish. Come on, buddy. 2 of them. Look at these 2 guys. They are not going to go for it. The bite is kind of off now. But periodically, I'll just cut off the top 4 or 5 feet of my fire line, and then that gives me a fresh new surface that I don't get as much ice buildup on. I do love braids because of the sensitivity of braid. You can really detect the bite. There's no stretch in it. You get good hook set, and that's why I prefer it over, say, monofilament. Fluorocarbon's kind of in between the two. But I like that it doesn't have a lot of memory. It has very low stretch, and I can detect those really light bites, especially when I'm, jigging for perch or trout, 30, 40 feet of water like I'm doing today. I really want to be able to detect that strike. There we go. And the final thing that you can do actually is just to get a shelter. A shelter will allow you to run a heater in there. Oh, I lost him. That sucks. Allow you to run a heater in there, and you can keep your guides ice free. You can keep yourself comfortable. A lot of times for me, if I'm out fishing and it's, below 15 degrees, I am pretty much always going to bust out the shelter, because otherwise you're going to be fighting that ice no matter what you do. I mean, no matter how much Vaseline or silicone spray you put on your guides, you're going to be dealing with ice and those kinds of temperatures. And a simple shelter, pop-up shelter, and a small gas heater is going to cure you of all those problems, and you'll be a lot more comfortable overall anyways. All right, well, I hope this video helped you out, and I'll see you next time out on the ice. Just remember, fish smarter, not harder. Bye, guys.